Hey everyone, this is Jason Probst, that guy in Hutch, and you're listening to that podcast in Hutch. Today I have somebody with me who's a number of things. He's a State Board of Education member, and he is directing the upcoming performance of Arsenic and Old Lace at Family Community Theater. Welcome, Ben Jones.
It's great to be here, Jason. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So, Arsenic and Old Lace is a pretty well-known play that people, high schools put it on. People kind of cut their teeth on this. Tell everyone what this play is about.
So it's purely a comedy. Most people will be familiar with it from its movie starring Cary Grant. And I forget the year that it was made, probably in the 50s. So apologies for not having the year off the top of my head, but it was a very popular movie when it came out. And it was originally written as a stage play. And the house is modeled after a house on the Bethel College campus in North Newton. So there are local Kansas ties to the show. It's written by Joseph Kisselring, who spent time at Bethel College as well. But it's purely a comedy. It's about two old ladies that have this house in Brooklyn, New York. And they, as a sign of mercy, give some of their guests who they deem old and without loved ones some wine laced with many poisons. More than just arsenic, but arsenic's the biggest ingredient, hence what the Arsenic and Old Lace comes from. And Assorted Adventures comes from that as it comes to light to other family members that were not aware of these two ladies' charities, so to speak.
Now, you're directing this performance.
Correct.
Talk to me a little bit about how you got into theater, why you got into theater, and specifically how you got into directing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a long story. So back in high school, and I attended Sterling High School, I was involved in all of the arts programs, band, choir, and theater. I did not go on stage until my junior year of high school. Theater was the last love I took on. I did primarily music before then.
What'd you play?
My primary instrument is voice, okay. And then I played clarinet. As years have gone on, I've delved into piano as my secondary and percussion as my third, and clarinet I haven't played for probably 3 or 4 years now. Okay. But then I did clarinet and voice primarily, and because of the voice, and Sterling has a vocal jazz program that they still have that's very strong today. Part of being vocal jazz is you're in the musical. And that was when we started doing musicals again after a long hiatus of really not doing them in the high school. So my very first show was called Babes in Arms, Rodgers and Hart. Okay. And it's an oldie but a goodie. It has favorite songs like My Funny Valentine comes from that show, Johnny One Note, some familiar standards. So I was on stage, but I usually helped do box office or backstage work, handle lights and stuff for plays. Went to college my first year, was not really doing anything musically, or any performance arts really. My first year of college was going into another field that after about a year realized that was not the field for me, and came back to Hutch JUCO and picked up music again. And that's been part of my life ever since, strongly, after your hiatus. And while I was at Hutch JUCO, the chair, Bill Brewer at the time, came up to me and said, "We're looking at doing Chicago, and I need you in the show for Amos Hart. I will tell you, you have the role of Amos Hart for auditions," because I need a Hutch JUCO student in there.
That's a boost of confidence.
Yeah, it is, especially since the year before I did do the musical Honk with them, and but I was just in the chorus. Okay. And I was Barnacles. Okay. Bullfrog. So I did have a solo spot, a cameo. That's what they call it, role. But I was generally in the chorus for that show. I'm like, okay. And I gave up a trip to New York with Badinage, which is the premier group, mm-hmm. to do this. I figured, it's local. How often do you get to play a musical lead and a great role like Amos? Yeah. In Chicago, it's a very iconic role. So I don't regret it. That's the first time I've done theater and it clicked. It's still, after all these years, and I've done probably 45 shows since then, at least 40. I know I'm on 48. I can't remember where in Chicago it laid, but, it clicked, and it made sense to me why we do theater. And ever since then, it's delved into music directing, which I got involved with my music background, because that is what I studied in college, was music, not so much theater. But I did music theater because they always need the voices.
Sure.
And now it's delved into directing. And there was a show that came about I saw it, Sterling High School did a show called The Amish Project.
Okay.
And it's about the 2006 nickel mines shooting in Pennsylvania, where it was on Amish schoolhouse. Mm-hmm. And it was huge news, not only for school shootings, which always make the news,
sure,
but also how the community responded, because it wasn't a typical response to that. And being from this area of Kansas, where we have a lot of Mennonite heritage, especially something similar to the Amish heritage of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, just south of here, I was very familiar with that storyline, and it felt like it was a really good representation of this. So I brought it to the board at Family Community Theater, which I do sit on, and they said, well, if we do the show, we want you to direct it. We want somebody who will do the show justice. Mm-hmm. But it was a stretch for FCT to do, because typically they do very family-oriented shows, very lighthearted, nothing extremely deep. And this show was very deep and very difficult. It's a very hard one for audiences to applaud to at the end, mm-hmm. because it just ends. It ends with a good sign of hope, but it's a very sentimental hope, and it's very emotional for the audiences as well as the cast. And that hooked me to being the director. And being a director, when you're in a show, you're focused on one character and one character only, and you're just deeming out of that. When you're the director, you're going to meet a whole family of characters, mm-hmm. and work on that character development with everybody in your cast, one-on-one, and then as a group. And as you develop a show, you get to see these characters mold and develop, and you develop, as a director, a relationship with those characters. I know they're fictional, but when you see somebody playing them, they become real life. And if they become real life to you as a director, to the audience, they will be as real as day to them. So it's a real treat to direct shows and get to meet all these people. Whereas when you're in the show, you only pretty much deal with your own character to that level.
Now, I want to expand on that a little bit, mm-hmm. because I've done a little bit of theater, done some acting, and done some script writing, but never done any directing. But so tell me how that looks. I mean, you, like you said, you have to see the entire stage. You have to see all the interaction between the characters. Like, kind of what do you look for, or what are you seeing as a director from that maybe 30,000 foot view?
Yeah. First of all, it's having a good script. That's key. Is having a show that actually has depth to it, mm-hmm. And versus something that's not well written, which it makes it harder. So shows like Amish Project, very well written. Diary of Anne Frank, very well written. Yeah. And this show, Arsenic and Old Lace, the reason it's lasted so long is because it's very well written. So that's the first step, and then finding through auditions actors that buy into how you're going to do the show. My big push is to have characters that are very believable in my shows. That's why I choose the shows I do. Mm-hmm. In terms of directing, is I don't necessarily like the superficial, fun, happy shows to direct. I like being in them. I like watching them. Audiences love them. Directing, it's not my style. I like the deeper shows for that. And then working with a wonderful team of people. And I have a wonderful production team. I have a wonderful assistant, Haley, who is, I call her my babysitter, because she takes the notes. She keeps me on schedule. She communicates with the cast. She's involved in a lot of the decisions with me. She's my right-hand person. She's there pretty much at everything, which has been great feedback. I have a wonderful set designer that when I tell him this is what I need this environment set. And he spends hundreds of hours, and I can say that he spent all of Labor Day weekend at the theater building the set, the entire weekend in the theater, pretty much from 8 o'clock till 10 o'clock, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., except for on Labor Day itself, because I came in there with rehearsal that evening, so he couldn't work that evening. But and he just does a phenomenal job just piecing together the pieces I need. And we talk about the sets for probably 3 months before we ever come up with an actual physical model of a set, because when the people walk into the Flag Theater, which does not have a curtain. The people walk in, see the set as they come into the show, into the theater space. And so it's important to set the tone of the show as people walk in. And that starts with a set. So to develop that sense of what the audience is about to be involved when they walk in is very important. And then all the props, making sure they're accurate, and costumes. I have wonderful people working on that as well. They have spent a lot of hours getting stuff together. We're still working on it. Still now, we're starting to incorporate a lot of props into the show now. So the props mistress she's been really busy as of late. So it's involving yourself with a lot of team, but it's all about the audience and making them feel that they're part of the story. And that they're not just seeing a whole bunch of people on stage reciting lines, but they're actually ingrained and they're watching something that takes them away from their troubles for 3 hours or 2.5 hours, however long the show is.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because, as an audience member, when you go to a performance, it is, you get to go in, you sit down, you enjoy yourself for 2 hours or 3 hours or however long the performance lasts. But from the moment a board decides which shows they're going to put on for that season, all the way through the final production, there are so many steps that, like you said, the director, the props, the set builder, costume, months of practice, all those things going on. You kind of talked about that, but you're doing this in a community theater, in a family community theater. So it's really oriented towards children and families, all volunteers, all amateur actors and performers. Can you talk about that a little bit and how that experience is?
Yeah. The beauty of community theater is that the people that are in your production are the people that you also see at Dillon's or Aldi's or wherever you grocery shop, Walmart, I guess. I live in Sterling, so Dillon's is my store. I have one grocery store to choose from, but and so it has that wonderful, and they have a passion for theater. They don't get paid to do it. It's out of their goodness and just their absolute love of performing that you get to see it. And so you get to use that passion that they already have and direct it into that. And with our younger actors, now this show doesn't have any kids in it, but it's a show meant for families to attend. So part of the family community theater isn't necessarily that we have a cast full of kids like we did in July with Frozen Jr., which was great and had great turnout. And it was a very fun night for everybody involved. This show is meant for you to bring your kids with you, have a family evening, family-friendly experience where you can laugh together as a family and just enjoy time, getting quality entertainment with something that's very important to us, and that's being with your family, whoever that may be. Working with locals is a wonderful experience. You build community inside the town that you live in, and that's what gives your town something to live for and something to strive for. And it's a good sign of the vibrancy of the town that you live in. Have
you ever worked with anyone who it's their first time acting?
Yep.
They never did it, and they maybe are a little nervous and uncomfortable. How do you work with someone like that? Or how do you get them over that?
I guess Diary, I worked with all experienced people, but Amish Project, I work with some brand new people on stage. And for this show, I'm working with somebody brand new. So it's getting them used to stage direction, orienting them around the theater and just basic operations. But it's letting them know that it's okay to fail at rehearsal. It's okay to bomb at a rehearsal. And I want you to bomb at rehearsal, not at a performance.
Yeah.
And that's a good time. And so it's just sitting them down from the get-go and saying, I wouldn't cast you if I didn't think you could do this. And that's true. If I cast you in a show and we put you in that role, I expect you to succeed in that role. And I think you can succeed. I totally believe. And that's where you have to start. You as the director have to believe that they can fulfill the role. And then you pour all that belief and you just say, you don't, for lack of a better term, I haven't really put it to words, but it's just like failure is, I want you to fail at rehearsals and try things. But the minute we start really solidifying it, you've tried everything that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And now you found something that does work. And I want you to build upon that success. And you have it. And you're around seasoned veterans. Some of them have a lot of stage experience. Some of them went to school for theater. And so you surround them with good people so they have models next to them.
Okay.
But you always say, this is a safe space. It's okay to fail in this space. We're here to build you up. I will tell you, trust me, I'm very plain spoken, especially my notes. I'm like, that's not working. Fix it.
Yeah.
And they do.
Well, that's an important thing. I think what I remember from my limited acting experience is there is a good deal of experimentation that goes on, and you really rely on the director to say that was exactly what I want, or you thought that worked, but it just doesn't work the way you think it does.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about that safe space, especially at a community theater level.
Now, I want to kind of create an intersection here between different roles you play in real life. You're directing a play. You've acted, you've been heavily involved in theater, but you're also on the State Board of Education. And talk to me about kind of what do people, in particular students, get out of some of these things like theater, music, band, things that I think traditionally we don't look at as having an tangible economic benefit in the normal parlance of things.
Totally. And I can go 2 routes with this. So I'll start with the academic route. When you ask employers, and we just completed a 50-stop success tour. The department did, Commissioner Watson, and one of them stops was here in Hutch. I unfortunately had a prior commitment, so I couldn't be here, but
I was able to make that one. It was great.
I'm glad. I've made several of them. I just didn't make the one here in Hutch. But we look at some of the needs at industry, and they always say, you know, what's the question that employers always ask? And it's always about time management, perseverance, creativity, all that stuff that those arts give you. Because as an artist, your very first time you ever try something, you will fail at it. Mm-hmm. It's pretty much a 100% failure rate the first time you try something. Whether it's the first time you try to learn a piece and then you sight read it and you're like, I don't know this one very often. Well, and you either have a choice. Either you dig in and learn it, or you just walk away from it. Yeah. And most of the time you dig in and you look at it and you get better. And the more experience you get, the better you get. When you start to challenge yourself with bigger pieces and realize, oh, maybe I can't do, the Nessun Dorma yet. I don't have Pavarotti's voice, but maybe I could do this and singing, for example. So there's just a high rate of failure in the arts, whether it's visual or the performing arts. First time you try something, you will fail, but you just keep attacking it. You keep practicing. You spend time in the practice room working on these runs. When you play clarinet, which I never was quite that good at, you work on these passages where you have these flowing 16th notes, and it's not always a B flat major scale. Sometimes it's an augmented scale or a modal scale. Mm-hmm. So it's just different fingering. So then you have to sit there and slow it way down and then gradually get to the tempo you need to be. And so in terms of that and where we're going for kids and success, it's about perseverance. It's about going through the difficulties. And we have a lot of kids that go through school that they get all A's in their classes. Mm-hmm. Then they hit college and discover that there's nobody on them about, you have to be here at this time, here at this time, here at this time. They have to do it themselves to do that. Yeah. It's all about that time management. And then realize that sometimes you hit that, I always hear students go, I didn't go to K-State, but I heard about K-State biology, mm-hmm. where that's a very difficult course to get through. And they said, that's a WEDOC course. There's 100 kids in that class in every section. And it's a hard one to pass. And just sit there, I'm like, oh, I'm not getting this. What do I need to do to get this? First time you get a B in your life and you totally shut down. But being involved in the arts teaches you that. It also teaches you creativity. There's a science behind it. And being in the music world, I'm more apt to that science than some of the other ones. But, there's a lot of connections that go between the left and right side of the brain when you do those things. And those connections, that gives you the logical thought side, but as well as the creative, ambiguous side. And this is where they get to meet and create things together. So it builds those synapses, which is important to employability later.
And I think I did read somewhere a while back that there are some strong similarities between music and math, right? To be able, like you said, it's all fractions in music, right? It's whole note, half note, quarter note, eighth note, 16th note. As you were talking, I was thinking about my experience playing saxophone in high school and middle school, and thought there's some problem solving in here too, which you were talking about, slowing the music down. It's not a matter of just, you have to adapt and you have to figure out how to solve the problem, how to master it. And then, like you said, push through and move on. I think that's very good. Now, you mentioned there might be another route you could take and talk about this.
Yeah. So the economical benefit, and what I always tell people is, well, why should I, do theater? And all the money that we spend on theater goes to businesses in this community. So all of our expenses, all the wood is bought here, all the paint is bought here, fabric, we buy as close because we need it as soon as we can. So we buy as close to home as we can. Pretty much the only money that goes out of the state or even in this region is the rights to the show, which typically go to New York or Chicago, whoever owns the rights to the show. That's the only money that leaves the community in terms of the show. So I always say, if you want to drive an economy, spend money at your local theater, because all that stuff goes back into your businesses downtown. And music, same thing. We used to have a robust music store. They've since retired at Johnson's Music, and I spent way too much money at that store. But that money was reinvested back in this community. And we still have Keller's Music, which repairs instruments. And all that money stays here. It stays local, and it betters our lives. I always say, the engineers help make the world work and gives us a what, but the arts gives us a why and a reflection of ourselves. It's what gives us the quality of life. And we need both in order to continue going.
I think that's important, because if you took a town like Hutch and you took the theater and the music and the art out of it and said, we're not going to have any of that, it would be a pretty dull and bland place to live, right? Having those things add, aside from, like you said, the economic benefit, the academic benefits, there's sort of there's a more maybe spiritual aspect of that it provides just this depth and richness to your community to have things like that to do, to go to have people involved in. And I think there's data to support that too, that communities that have these things tend to do a little better, right?
Oh yeah, they attract families. When families look for a place to live, they see, what activities can I get my kids in?
Yeah.
And the arts is always a good place to go. There's always the athletic side as well, which teach some of the same things. My brother did sports. I was the arts. My brother was the sports. And I said, I'm still doing my stuff.
Yeah.
He's not doing his stuff, and he's 6 years younger than I am.
Yeah.
And so I said, investing in the arts, doing both is great. And I would encourage people to do both when they're younger. But for me, sports was not my thing. I enjoy watching them, no desire to ever do them.
Yeah.
But I get to do my arts, and I see people in their 80s doing the arts. I went to a concert with Tony Bennett about 5 years ago at the Stiefel Theater. He was around. It was right before his 90th birthday. He was 89 at the time, still performing. So it's a lifelong commitment, but it's a lifelong joy and abilities to continue on throughout life to do art.
Now, you talk about Tony Bennett, you talked about your own experience. There is something about performing, and in particular theater, that it does get in your blood. Oh, yeah. It really gets in there. Why do you think that is? Because people that I know that do it, they don't stop being involved. They don't want to stop being involved. It's not like, very few people that I know go in and they do one show and they back out and they're never involved in it again.
I think for everybody it's a little bit different. For me, it was always about meeting new people, and I know they're fictional, but it was really meeting new people, people that aren't like you. And I'm always intrigued by people that think differently than me, have different interests. I'm always intrigued by that as to what's important. Why is what's important to them important to them?
Yeah.
And what in their story makes it happen, which intersects with everything else I do too. When people talk to me, I'm like, okay, why do you think that way? But some of it is just the challenge of it. It's a craft where you don't know if you've ever hit perfection. And it's always that strive for perfection. But do you ever really get there?
Yeah.
And I very rarely get there. I could count on 3 times that I've experienced that feeling, and it's euphoric.
Yeah.
There's no words to describe it, just euphoric. When that happens, it didn't happen very often. 4 times. I just remembered all 4 times. And all the hundreds of concerts I've done, 48 stage productions, 4 times I've just said that was an absolutely perfect. That was perfect. Yeah. And so it's that strive to get that high, so to speak.
And I think you talk about that. Artists are largely their own worst critics, right? They look at what they've done and they say, "Oh, I blew it," and few people in the audience even know,
Oh, yeah.
right? But to themselves, they're saying, "Oh, I blew it. It was awful. Everybody knew how awful I was," and it's just a interesting. I mean, I've known a lot of artists over the years, and they're all pretty hard on themselves.
Oh yeah, yeah. Regardless of their craft. Their artist craft. Definitely I was around an individual. I have no talent in visual arts. I don't have the patience for it.
Yeah.
And it's over challenging for me. Stick people are, and they're even bad, in my world. But I was, around a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago, and we were playing games, but they were also drawing something on the side. And to me, it was really detailed and really odd. And they were just doing it with a pencil.
Yeah.
And it was 8 different shades of the lead color, of gray, and it was all just one. I was like, how do you know how much pressure, how much? I don't even get that. And to me, it was just amazing. And they're like, "Oh, this is junk."
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
I hear you. I've seen that before too. In anything, music, theater, art, I look and I'm just like, I'm blown away by the talent. And they're like, "Oh, that was awful. I can't believe I crumple this up and throw it in a trash can and hope that nobody ever sees that again."
Yeah, definitely. And I just think it's this pursuit of something internal, and you're always trying to look for it. And as an artist, you're always trying to chase it. And once you find it, which occasionally you do, and it's absolutely euphoric.
And that keeps you coming back for more.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, tell us when the show Arsenic and Old Lace will be playing at the Flag Theater.
Yes, we open October 7th. We go through October 10th. The show starts at 7:30 on October 7th, 8th, and 9th, Thursday through Saturday, and then a matinee at 3 o'clock on the 10th. Tickets are available at the door. You can purchase them online or at our outlets at Bookends or Absolutely Home in downtown Hutchinson, or on Main Street in Hutchinson. And doors open 30 minutes before showtime. And we love to have great audiences there. Theater's at 310 North Main. And you're going to laugh a lot. I'm laughing. We finished blocking the show last night. So tonight we're going to start running the show in its entirety. And I'm laughing at things that I've seen already 10, 15, 20 times, which is a good sign.
Very good sign. So make sure you take the time to check this out and remember what an important part of our community theater is, and in particular, the family community theater. Thanks, Ben, for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Hey, everyone. I just wanted to take a moment and say we're having a lot of fun doing this podcast, and I'm really, every week, I'm just excited with the people that I get to visit with. And I hope you're enjoying it too. And if you are, it's really important that we get more people to listen to this podcast to make it sustainable. As much as I like doing it, it's going to be hard to keep going if we don't have as many listeners as we'd like. There are some simple things you can do. If you like it, first off, tell your friends about it. Make sure you share it with people. Talk to them. Say you got to listen to this and you'll find it interesting, and get the word out about it. Another thing you can always do is like it, subscribe, and rate it on your player like iTunes or Spotify. Just anything you can do to kind of indicate to other people that this is something worth listening to. Another thing you can do is subscribe to my newsletter, which is thatguyinhutch.substack.com. There's a free option, but there's a paid option on there. When you subscribe on the paid option, you're helping both my newsletter and the podcast continue. Anything you can do to help on this end to make sure we spread this out, get more people listening, we'd really appreciate it, because I want to keep doing it. I want to keep bringing interesting people from our community and our state in for you to visit with. So if you are in town this weekend and you say there's nothing to do, you are not trying very hard, because this is one of the biggest weekends of the year in Hutchinson. We have a lot of things going on. I'm only going to hit on a couple of them here because they're the bigger ones. But on Friday from 6 to 8, October 1st, the Hutchinson Arts Center will have its auction preview reception. This is open and free to the public, and it's a chance for you to look at the art that will be available later in the month at the Hutchinson Arts Center auction. Again, that's 6 to 8 p.m. on Friday, October 1st. And then downtown this weekend on October 1st and 2nd will be the Downtown Hutchinson Rod Run. And that, if you haven't been, it's a real treat and you need to go. They will have cars lined up and down the street. They have bands throughout the day, through the night. They have a burnout. They have, and this year we'll have the Hutch Brew Fest. So you'll be able to tuck into another area and have some really good craft beer that's going to be brought in. We're going to have craft brewers from all over the state. The Rod Run is always a great time, and it's a great way to spend some time downtown and enjoy a hobby that a lot of people put a lot of love and a lot of effort into. And if you come down for that, I know you won't be disappointed. If you have an event that you want highlighted on that podcast in Hutch, or you want to let me know about it so I can talk to others about it, don't hesitate at all to let me know. Or contact information's in the show notes. I'd like to thank a few of the people who've helped make that podcast in Hutch possible. My son Mitchell Probst wrote and recorded the music for the show. Jenny Brigette put together some great graphics and promotional art. And Chris Acker helps overcome my mistakes to produce a great sounding product every episode. That podcast in Hutch is made possible through a collaboration between the Hutchinson Arts and Culture Collective and Salt City Sound. They're working to bring resources and infrastructure to support art, music, and storytelling in our community. If you have an idea for your own podcast, reach out to them at podcasts@saltcitysound.net. If you enjoy that podcast in Hutch, be sure to subscribe and share it with all your friends. You can also help support this production by subscribing to thatguyinhutch.substack.com or by emailing me at thatguyinhutch@gmail.com to learn about sponsorship opportunities. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us again next week.
A Salt City Sound production.